Howdy, y'all! Welcome to another edition of the TD Podcast, the best neurodivergent podcast that you don't know about, with I, the ever infamous theatric dyspraxic. Now, today is going to be a very interesting episode, at least for me. Obviously, speaking to different dyspraxics, most of the people that I've had on were from the UK or Ireland, although last time I had on someone from the Netherlands, which was cool. And they were all very wonderful guests to have and great people to talk to. But there are always cultural differences with us being from different parts of the world, which is enriching, and I always enjoy learning about different cultures and how dyspraxia affects people from all over the place. But sometimes you want to talk to someone who knows a little bit more about what it's like to have dyspraxia in your own country. And so today, not only do I have someone who is also a fellow American, salute, but is also from the Lone Star state of Texas. Her name is Mary-Teresa Robinette. She is 23 years old and just recently discovered that she was dyspraxic. And so she is here to talk about her experiences. So I'm happy to introduce Miss Mary-Teresa. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for having me on here.
It's exciting, isn't it, to be on such a popular podcast, which is mine, not really.
Oh,
But
I'm overwhelmed.
um, so, getting right into it, being that we're both from the state of Texas, I'm sure there are a lot of similar experiences that we share that are unique to us. I suppose what I want to ask first, if there even really is a proper answer to this kind of question, how do you feel your experience has been in Texas and struggling with a neurological disorder like dyspraxia? Is there anything that you feel is distinct with the culture of Texas? And is it hard to relate to others from here? What has it generally been like for you?
Okay, so hate to burst a bubble. I live in Texas now. I did not grow up here, but
Ah, I see. Shouldn't
yeah,
have
I grew
assumed
up
that.
on the West Coast, Washington State. So it was a pretty liberal background compared to Texas. So
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure there are some differences there, but yeah, just being American, I think overall, like everything that I know about dyspraxia, it's not talked about in America at all. Like even professionals sometimes don't even know what it is.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
so I mean, growing up was just uh, yeah, it wasn't on the radar at all.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background being from Washington. I actually have a brother who lives in Washington, funny enough. Um,
Oh yeah,
and So obviously, I mean, America being is such a big country that there's just different, like Texas and Washington are, of course, hugely different states. So at what
yeah.
point, what age were you whenever you actually moved to Texas? And what was that like for you
I'm
being from Washington?
yeah. I moved here a few months ago, actually, just this past summer.
So very recent.
So so I'm still somewhat adjusting to a lot of the cultural differences here. But I think the biggest thing uh, is politics, and not to get controversial, but I feel like growing up in Washington, especially like the schools there, like as a child, everything was very advanced. I feel like compared to some other areas of the country, like they were, in some ways very advanced, like putting out special programs and if you were in school and you needed IEPs, individualized plans, like they were willing to work with you a lot more than I've heard stories about Texas and other states. So in a way, I think that they were pretty advanced, but I think with dyspraxia in general, um, it's just for whatever reason, America, like we are not there yet. We don't have the resources for dyspraxia yet, but hopefully we can spread awareness and we can get more awareness about it
Yeah,
and get those resources in place.
absolutely. I'm interested just to ask. So you did you have any like preconceptions about Texas, and has it been accurate? Whatever you thought of Texas would be like. What are some things that kind of surprised you? Kind of since you are new to the state, and I'm not. You know, I lived in Texas my entire life, but I don't consider myself Texan. You know, like even with politics, obviously,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, people are very conservative here, and I do have, you know, my conservative side. I mean, I don't like to go too much into politics just because that's always a slippery slope right
Exactly.
now, especially
Yeah, it
in
is.
this climate. But I've always been very middle ground, middle of the road. So I try to see different sides of everything. Um, what are some of the, was there like a culture shock? Like what, how do you compare living? Because I can't even really compare because I've only lived in Texas. So what is it? What
Yeah.
the differences?
Um, well, the biggest thing is just like the environment from a city setting. And Texas has been more rural, some suburban areas, but I think that's very different, living in crowded apartments and going on crowded streets and buses and everything. And here in Texas, it's like you just see like fields
Yeah,
and
those big
you
old
have
open
to,
plains.
yeah, if your car breaks down in the wrong place, like you're not getting home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some of these
So, I mean,
places out in
that's,
Texas, going out in the country, it's almost like Deliverance or something. It's, you know, there's scary
yeah.
parts, you
So,
know.
I mean, yeah, but I think like people here are pretty friendly. Obviously, like I don't get into politics really with people either, so I'm not sure like I'm sure that would be very different. But people here like even just meeting my neighbors, they're like so nice like, "Oh, if you ever need a cup of sugar," like that like stereotypical southern
The Southern
vibe. It's really
hospitality.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's always funny to me how people have certain kind of notions about certain places, and then you go there and it's like, oh, it's like everywhere else almost, you know. There's obviously those differences like being more land and you know, you do it's not as unusual to see a person walking around with a cowboy hat here than it would be in other places, but most of the time it's like you think everyone's gonna be like a redneck or a country bumpkin, and you get those, but like most people around, I mean, everybody that I've known, not every, you know, most of the people I've known have been from Texas, born and bred, and they're just like a regular person. You don't see them as a Texan. You just see them as, you know, this my friend, you know, Kyle or whatever.
That's true. Like, I am actually a little disappointed by the lack of Southern accents that I've encountered and by the lack of people I've seen wearing cowboy boots and cowboy hats. But
Yeah, and I'm right there with them. I mean, I don't even own a pair of cowboy boots. I can't stand boots of any kind. They're so
yeah,
uncomfortable. Um, and it's yeah, it's a strange feeling. I think a lot of it is the whole accent thing. I think that accents are just kind of going away in general. Like they're all kind of morphing into the same thing because we're so exposed to, you know, the media and having with people on TV having certain accents that we just like the people here who have the thickest southern accents are usually the older people, you know, who have got
that's a
developed
good
those
point. I
accents.
never thought about that.
Yeah. So you're not so people like my age, you know, but I always feel like I have an accent, but people tell me I don't. Like, I don't
Um,
know.
I can, I don't know how to describe it. I guess I can hear something, but I wouldn't consider it a Southern, like, howdy, hey, ho,
Yeah, it's not
hi, like accent. I don't know.
not like a deep drawl, you know.
Okay, yeah, that's something.
But yeah, I mean, I could turn it on, but it's not the
Should you?
natural way that I talk all the time.
Yeah,
But going back to dyspraxia, so you grew up in Washington, right?
I
Um,
did, yeah.
so tell me about your earliest experiences. Like, it's hard to ask, sort of. So what, like, when did you first kind of notice that there were some things that were different about
hmm Yeah, good question. So like now, obviously knowing that dyspraxia exists, I can like look back and be like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Like, because as a kid, I just thought that like I was defective somehow in like
Hmm.
a lot of different ways. And so the thing is, like, there were different things that I didn't think were connected. Like, okay, I was always a bit clumsy and never really did well at sports. Like, I would always get hit in the head with balls or something because I couldn't move fast enough or never
Hmm.
had good aim. I never learned how to ride a bike. So, like, I was never good at like the physical activity stuff. But then, like, I also had some issues with my fine motor, like what my hands could do. So as a young kid, actually, they noticed that I like was not holding my pencil correctly. So they put me in occupational therapy when I was like in second grade or something, like 8 years old. And so like there were some issues like that, but I didn't realize like, oh, that there could be a connection. Um, I have like just a lot of like random memories, like playing cards with my family and not being able to hold all of the cards in my hands and like just feeling like, oh, like why can everyone else do that and I can't? And just kind of being like, oh, well, she's quirky. And just kind of not, just kind of like they were all small things that together made me feel defective. But individually, it's like, well, how am I supposed to be like, Mom, I can't hold cards in my hand? Or like, so I just kind of felt like it wasn't important. Like, oh, it was just something wrong with me. And I just need to like find a way to get over it, get over all these little things that I couldn't do. Um, so, I mean, yeah, I noticed like from a fairly young age, and I just thought that, like, oh, well, this is just normal. And then when I realized it wasn't normal, it was like embarrassing. So I was like, oh, I'll just find a way to, um, to cope with it and just pretend like I am normal, I guess.
Right. So, like, what was like the age that you kind of looked at yourself and your experience? Because I always, I remember distinctly the first like 9 years of my life. I didn't like, I noticed that I was different. I noticed that I had certain challenges, but I didn't care about it because there were things that I was good at. I was good at the creative stuff. And I was just so wrapped up in my own imagination and, creating stories and things that it was like something that I pushed in the back of my mind. And then it wasn't until I was probably in like the fourth grade that I was really starting to examine, like, yeah, I really have some issues and what's the deal, you know? And that was sort of the first time I started feeling sort of isolated and embarrassed by it. So, did you have any experience like that where it was just sort of like at a certain point you realized, like, it just kind of sunk in and you realized that you just, yeah, this is a kind of a big deal, you know?
Kind of. I feel like with my personal experience, I was fairly distracted by other things, like other issues in my childhood, like family drama and things like that. So like you like how you were distracted because you were good at being creative, so you just didn't pay attention. I was distracted by other things, and so um, like by the time that kind of settled down, and I could like really realize like, hey, I think like actually other kids like they don't have that or they don't do that. I was probably in middle school, like 12 or 13 or so. And at that point, it was just kind of embarrassing. And like, again, like I just felt like there was something wrong with me. Like, oh, I'm just not good like everyone else can do these things. I can't type on a computer like everyone else can, or like I can't do crafts with my hands the way that other kids can. So like it mostly just became a cover up. Like I didn't want to address it. I wasn't wondering why I couldn't do that. I just knew that I couldn't, and I just didn't want other people to know.
Right. You just wanted to just kind of hide it and just like try your best to be like the bourgeois, be like everyone else. Like just kind of fake it till you make it, I guess, kind of outlook, right?
Yeah, yeah. Basically, yeah. Um, and like also I struggled with dyscalculia in school and didn't have a name for that. And I feel like in some ways dyscalculia was more like traumatizing for me than the actual dyspraxia because like it was awful. So
So
I was always bad
dyscalculia,
at math.
right, being a struggle with math and numbers, which I'm pretty sure I have that as well. But I want to hear more about your experience with that and
Oh, yeah.
how,
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
Go
Oh
ahead.
gosh. It's like it's good to talk about because I think it's good to spread awareness about it, but like it still gets me like so upset because it was such an injustice. Okay. So, and I say that somewhat jokingly, but like anyway. I was always just in my own words, I was like I was bad at math. Like I even had an IEP, an individualized like education plan in school. So like the school district had to provide me with special resources specifically for math. But I was never like diagnosed with anything like dyscalculia. Um, it was just like, oh well, she's not good at math, so like give her extra time on tests or something.
Right, kind of.
And then yeah, and so they did um they whatever grade I was in, they would give me a lower grade for math. So like I ended up in high school. I graduated high school, but like I was at a 6th grade level for math. So like it was acknowledged that I had math problems. And I don't really know why they never like officially tested me or diagnosed me with dyscalculia because it's so
Right.
obvious now, but I had no idea that this was a thing.
It was like
So I
they just
remember
kind of saw it as general math difficulties
yeah,
rather than like a
which is
specific.
like such a shame. Like that is such a shame because dyslexia I think is something that is commonly talked about.
Mhm.
Or you hear it in the media or different things like that. But I've always been really good at reading and writing and things like that. So that was never a concern. But in school, like I would always failing my math classes. I would get tutors. They would show me something. I would immediately forget it. Like teachers would become frustrated with me. I was in remedial classes. It was not good. Like the day of my high school graduation. Okay, the day of my graduation, I was trying to finish this online course for math. So I'm it's like 17 years old and I'm taking a 6th grade level math class and I am weeping while trying to finish this course online because I can't understand what it's asking me about fractions. And I ended up having to Google the answers and barely passing the class on the day of my graduation.
Wow.
It was such a frustrating thing for me, like my whole life. And even like when I went to college, because I didn't have an official diagnosis of anything, none of my IEP, like that didn't carry over into my college math class. And like I barely passed that. And my tutor got mad at me and they're just like, well, then why are you in this class if you can't do the math? And it's like, I don't know because I need to take this math class, you
They
know?
put me in here.
Yeah, exactly.
You think I
And
want
so
to be?
like I know. So when I learned about dyspraxia and I like learned that it said dyscalculia and I was like, wait a minute, what is that? And I was like, like that's totally what I have. And it was like it kind of was a bittersweet thing because I was like, oh well now I know. But then also like kind of like angry at like literally all those years in school and no one thought to like test me for this. But honestly, it just made me want to like go back to that tutor who was tutoring me for my college math class and be like, see, look, I have dyscalculia. See,
I have a reason.
I
Yeah.
have a reason. Yeah. Gosh, like
So,
I passed, but barely.
right, by the skin of your teeth.
hmm
So I relate to all of that because again, I feel like I have to have that as well because I had very much the same kind of experiences. I was also in remedial math class. In fact, I have a pretty horrible memory of the first day of my sophomore year of high school. I was I was so bad at math that, and even just being in remedial math, they felt like I was struggling too much. So they straight up decided for just that one period to put me in the class with the special ed students, like, all the kids that were that had, actual like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
disabilities and stuff like that. And I just remember, and at that time, I was very like self-conscious about my image and not being, and I feel bad about it now, and I know that it was like kind of wrong, but I didn't want to be seen as being associated with that group. Um,
Hmm.
it was just something that was a point of shame for me. And so that was like my worst nightmare, was being, I'm being seen as one of them, which is, not a good way to look at that, because they're people too, obviously.
Right, but
And
like as a kid, like
yeah,
as
you
an
just want to seem like
adolescent or a
everybody
kid,
else.
yeah, like it takes a huge toll on your self-esteem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you care about those things more and more. And for me, it was like all the issues that I had, which are basically the same issues that you talked about, stuff, problems with sports, problems, holding pen correctly. I didn't even think about the card stuff until you mentioned it. I was like, oh yeah, I had that experience too, not being able to hold cards correctly. Um, and but for me, it was like everything. Like, I always question it. Like, what is wrong with me? Why do I have all these different issues? And again, like you, I didn't connect to them. It was just like, I suck at this, I suck at this, but I never even considered them being related to each other. Um, but going through the math stuff, that was always like I would always make great, almost straight A's, and then I would always make like I'd always be barely passing in math. In fact, I'm pretty sure that after a while in high school in my math class, they just let me pass. Like my teacher would just give me a 70. I always made a 70 on
Yeah.
every test. And even like I even one time I was like, I even tried to fail a test on purpose by like just putting in random stuff, and I still made a 70. So I'm pretty sure that I was just kind of being, let through, so that I wasn't being disqualified from doing the school plays and stuff.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, like it must be hard for teachers too. I've worked in schools now as an adult, like as a teacher's assistant and working with kids. And I've seen firsthand, like, I don't know necessarily about dyspraxia because at the time I didn't know what dyspraxia was, but there are kids, if there's one child who's falling a bit behind in a subject, it's teachers are under such pressure to move the whole class, like, oh, the
Yeah,
whole class has to be on this has to be on this component at this level. And so if a student isn't, like, they fall behind. And it's hard because usually teachers, in my experience, they do want to help, but they're limited in what they can do because they're like, oh,
right.
like, well, we have to keep going. We have to keep going. It does the child a disservice in a lot of ways. But yeah, I can imagine that there are probably some really good teachers out there who are just like, okay, like you just missed that one. Like, I'll just give it to you. Like,
Right.
you can pass.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I come from a family of teachers. My parents were both teachers. They're retired now. Grandparents both teach. So I, I've witnessed firsthand the level of pressure that is put on teachers, and I can't even imagine it, like becoming a teacher. How much, because you have to look after so many people, and like you said, it's like when one person falls to the wayside, you have to you have to put everything, all your energy into allowing the collective to float. But whenever there's you can't spend too much, a disproportionate amount of time trying to help one individual to, thrive whenever you have so many other people that you're trying to keep afloat. So I totally understand, and I have no blame. Well, some teachers are different. There's some teachers
Well,
bad,
I
but
know what you mean. Yeah.
but I don't blame teachers for the experiences that I had. And in fact, it's really hard to blame anybody. You can only blame ignorance and, just people being overworked and just not having the right resources or knowledge to be able to help somebody who is struggling.
Like, I just had this memory of, like, again, being, that little kid, and like the teacher coming over and be like, oh no, you hold your pencil like this. And I like could not figure it out. And just being sent to like occupational therapy. And then them realizing like, oh, and you also like don't know how to tie your shoes. And like also you have trouble with buttons. So like a lot of things that I'm remembering, I'm like, yeah,
it's
that
like
makes sense now.
such specific memories, and it's so crazy just to remember so well being that kid. And I was always, dramatic. So like, I made it like the, this big like, what is wrong with me? Why is this so? I was so melodramatic about it. I was, what is, and again,
Yeah.
didn't even connect the pieces of the struggle with, I couldn't tie my shoes, couldn't ride a bike. It's all the same kind of cause, and it's interesting
Yeah.
how so many people can have these same experiences and just feel so alone about it. Because I felt that way. I felt like I was the only person in the world who was like this, and it was very isolating for me.
Exactly. Like I really I don't even know if there's a better word, like defective. Like there's just something wrong with me and that's just how it
Broken.
is. And I had some dramatic tendencies also. So it just kind of was like, oh, she's dramatic. Don't pay any mind to her. She's just exaggerating. So that, yeah, if you think about it, not to be too hard on like our parents or our teachers or whatever, because if they've never heard of this, and yeah, like, and I'm dramatic, you're dramatic, what are they supposed to think?
Right. And that's really, it's like it's so easy to criticize like the older generation for the way they handled like, learning difficulties or mental illness and stuff like that, because it was a different time and there was only so much that the public conscious was aware of. And
Right.
it's like nowadays we know so much more about ADHD and autism and dyslexia and stuff, and there's all these resources and programs. And you can't, obviously you can't blame people for just being ignorant. My life would have been much easier and much different had I heard about dyspraxia, sooner than I did. And I probably would have been spared a lot of personal anguish and heartache. But
Mm-hmm.
in a way, though, for me, like it's almost like a blessing in disguise because now I get to share my experiences with, on this podcast, and I'm writing a book about my experiences as well. And it's allowed me to kind of tell my story so that maybe in the future, people don't have to go through what I went through, what we went through. And, just that's why I do what I do, so that people can talk about it. And maybe somebody, will come across this and listen to it and think, oh, I have these issues, and, or my child has these issues. And maybe, you know, maybe things can get better, because I do firmly believe that people want to help. Obviously, if my parents knew
Mm-hmm.
about what was the cause of my problem, um, then I'm sure they would have, acted accordingly. It's just
Right.
they knew about it, you know.
Yeah. I think any exposure where people can hear the term dyspraxia, I think that's really helpful because honestly, it's kind of wild how I found out what dyspraxia was. Okay. I was in like, I think it was like Instagram Reels, and I was watching a video of someone like of this girl braiding her hair. And I always was like, oh, I really think that's really pretty, but I've never been able to braid my hair. My fingers just, they don't work that way.
Right.
And so I've kind of like, and that was something for so long where I was like, oh, I'm just like defective. I'm just, you know, stupid because I can't do that, which most other girls can do. And someone in the comments she's like, actually, it's really not that easy for everyone. And people were responding like, what do you mean it's not easy? And she was just like, well, I have dyspraxia, so it makes this hard. And I remember reading that and being like, you have what? What is that? That makes braiding hard? And like it sparked a curiosity in me. And I was like, well, braiding's hard for me too. What is this? And I Googled it and I was like, what? And it just like opened up like this whole world. And
you went down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, but from a comment. So I mean, I'm just imagining like how many people are probably out there and are thinking like that there's just something wrong with them, or like that they're defective, or that they just like, oh, I can't do like everyone else can do that. And they just don't realize that there's like an actual reason, and like there's a whole community of us out there.
Therein lies the tragedy of it. Sorry, I hope you didn't hear me burp just now. As I was talking about the great tragedy of dyspraxia, is because ultimately we can go through life and excel. You know, someone with dyspraxia, they're not defective, even though we feel that way. There's a lot of things that we are able to do. It's just, and if more people understood it and there was more awareness for it, then we could kind of it's like, you know, now we can make things a little bit easier for people with dyslexia and other kinds of learning difficulties. The more people learn about it, but the first step is for people to learn about it for themselves, as in people who have these issues, but they don't know what dyspraxia is. They haven't heard of what dyspraxia is. And it's like you come across these random, you know, it's never something that you look up like you do research. You just like, you hear about it and it's just just from happenstance, you know, like you read it from a comment. For me, I was just reading about the actor Daniel Radcliffe, and he said that he had dyspraxia, and I was like, what's that? And then I read an article and I saw all the symptoms. And so like whenever you first like came across like an article or read about the symptoms, what was your initial reaction? Because for me, it was like, I just about wept, you know, talk about dramatic. I just like, it was just like this eye-opening experience. Like, I'm looking at this list of these symptoms, and it's like, this is like a checklist of everything that I've ever struggled with in my entire life. And it's just like, now there's like a name for it. So like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, pretty similar, honestly. I think my jaw was just wide open. I was like, no, no, no. And like just reading each thing and being like, yeah, that's me, that's me, that's me. Well, and it just kept getting more like, oh, what a coincidence. And then like it was just so hard to believe. And it felt very affirming. It felt very validating. You know, I kind of just had to like sit there and just think, and like, wow, like there's actually like a reason for this. Because all those years I don't know. I just thought there was something wrong with me, that there was just no explanation. And here was an explanation. And literally everything fit perfectly. And so then I was like, this is great. Like, what information can I find about it? And I realized fairly quickly that everything was like in the UK. And I was like, well, but like I'm in America. What resources are there in America?
I can't swim on over.
Yeah. And so that's when I kind of realized they're like, oh, it goes by DCD, developmental coordination disorder. So I like looked that up, and I mean, there was just hardly anything there. There were some things, but like not really anything helpful for me. I really, my first reaction was like, this is great. Now, how do I get a diagnosis? Because I know, like, as validating as this is, I just, I guess it's one of those things where it's like, if I could tell people and if I could prove it somehow, I think that would be so like affirming to me and validating for me. Um, and I just realized fairly quickly that it would be next to impossible to get a diagnosis in America.
Hmm. Um, so whenever I found out, I was 17, and like this was in the summer. So and it's funny because the moment that I found out about it, not to make this all about me, but the moment that I found out about it, I knew I had to tell someone. I don't know if you felt that way. It's like I gotta tell someone. Um,
Yeah.
but I told first person I told was my brother, and he was all like he was busy. He was like wrapped up in whatever he was writing at the time, and he made a comment that was just like basically saying that don't just because you read something on the internet doesn't make it true. It was basically kind of dismissive, and that just kind of like
Yes.
that kind of shattered almost shattered the catharsis of it. That because again for me it was affirming and validating as well, but then I realized that as affirming and validating as it was for me, other people may not take me seriously just because I say this is the case and I know this is true. Um, Other people may not believe me. And right after I like just less than a month later, we just suddenly like moved to a different town and my sister and I were twins. We had to spend our senior year somewhere else. We were struggling to, the transition, and at the time I was in this new school, I was like trying to ask around about, I was trying to say I recently read about this thing called dyspraxia, and I, I want to see if maybe I could get a diagnosis for it. And I could not find anybody that one had ever heard of it. And because they had never heard of it, they were just very dismissive about it.
Yeah.
They didn't care. And I was at that age and I kind of had this thought in my mind of, well, I'm almost an adult now. Who's going to care about this now? You know, because
Mhm.
I felt like once you become an adult, all your struggles don't matter to society. So you just kind of like, I'm screwed now. And again, I couldn't get a diagnosis. Everybody, um, I remember they brought in this guy. I don't know if he worked for some kind of neurological center or whatever, but they had him come in, and he kept talking about dysgraphia, and he kept using the term dysgraphia as if as if that was what I was talking about. And his advice was buy a trampoline and jump, and
What?
that will improve your like coordination or battle. I don't
Oh
know,
no.
but that was his great advice. Is if I
I
put,
mean, it sounds kind of fun, but
I mean, I like jumping on a trampoline, but it didn't necessarily help my motor skills or the other
yeah,
aspect of
yeah,
that I was struggling with. So that was sort of that feeling, I think. And again, it's funny because you and I are both from the US, so when I talk to people from the UK, it's like, oh yeah, I got a diagnosis for dyspraxia, and I didn't know until I was diagnosed, and they did an assessment, and it was like, yeah, that didn't happen with me because there was no assessment, there was no because in the UK,
hmm
and again, it's things aren't perfect in the UK, and they're still trying to spread more awareness there too.
right.
It's like just totally different than what it is here. Um, And that's the sad thing about it is once you realize it, it's like then you have to try and convince people to take you seriously.
Yeah, like that it's a real thing. Okay, so I had the first person I told was my boyfriend, and he was very supportive, which was great. And then I kind of, put some feelers out and was like, okay, maybe I'll tell you. And like I like they thought I was joking. And so I remember like I told I told someone and they were just like, "Oh, you're bad at math? Oh, maybe I have that too." Or like, "Oh, you're clumsy. I stubbed my toe. Maybe I have that." Haha. And then they were like, "Is that a real thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, like okay, maybe I just don't tell everyone yet. Maybe
So they were kind
so
of
I'm still
like,
kind of trying to work out, like who to share this with.
mhm.
Um, because like I also like I don't want to be mocked, but like they didn't mean it in a bad way. They just had never heard of it. They thought I was joking.
I've had similar experiences too, where people are like one of my friends, he told me like, maybe I'm dyspraxic because I'm not good with sports and stuff. It's like, well, not everyone's good with sports. You're not dyspraxia just because you suck at throwing the
Right.
ball. It just goes deeper than that. It's just like somebody who, we all make reading mistakes, but that doesn't mean we're all dyslexic. You know,
Right.
we all struggle to make eye contact, but that doesn't mean we're autistic or, we might be hyper. A child can be hyper. It doesn't mean he's ADHD. There's all these different things that you, I understand the whole idea of dismissing someone because of a self-diagnosis because there are those people that will just say they have something just because they have one symptom, you know.
Yeah.
But with dyspraxia, because it's such a the symptoms are so specific, they're not as general. There are some general things about it like clumsiness and stuff, but a lot of the symptoms are very specific to certain like tasks. Like the things whenever dyspraxics talk about their general difficulties, what are the things they usually bring up? Difficulty tying shoes, messy handwriting, can't ride a bike. It's a lot of the same kind of things, although it does sort of run deeper than that. And then there are cognitive aspects to it as well that I think don't get talked about as much as like the coordination stuff. Because the cognitive difficulties that come from me having dyspraxia, uh, I feel like have been the most debilitating of anything, rather than the physical stuff. Although that is taking a lot of toll on me as well. But I don't know what for you. Does your dyspraxia primarily affect the physical, like the coordination and stuff like that, or do you suffer from a lot of the cognitive struggles, like short-term memory and thought processing, spatial awareness, executive function, all that kind of stuff? Does that affect you in the same kind of way, or is it primarily the coordination? So,
Um, it's a great question. I think I'm still learning. Um, I know I do have some issues with space. Um, like it, like okay, it took me a really long time to learn to drive a car because of like I think that's a big reason of that too because I like it's hard for me to gauge like how much space is on my side. Am I going to hit someone? Um, I think I sometimes do have trouble with my thought processing. And I know like that's something I'm learning with dyspraxia. Even their, I don't even know how to word it, their speech processing. I think she was British, but someone was like, does anyone else waffle on? And I never heard that term before, but they just meant like keep talking and talking. And I was like, oh
waffle.
yeah, I guess that's yeah.
And
They were
that's one of
like,
the
we just keep waffling on and on.
I love those British colloquialisms. Just the little
Yeah.
things that they say. I feel like we don't have those in Texas. I think what the only colloquialism that I can think of is, "Oh, that's something is all get out." You ever hear people say that? My mom says that.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that was specifically Texas, though.
I mean, I've only heard it here. I mean, again, I haven't been in it, but I think that But anyway, yeah, I always say like one of these days my mom's gonna say that something is all get out, and we're all just gonna leave the room when she says that. Um, but
Yeah.
waffling on, that's an interesting phrase.
Yeah.
Um,
It made sense though, because I was like, yeah, sometimes I have trouble. Like in my mind, I know what words I want to say, I know what message I want to convey, and my words just don't come out the right way. And
yeah,
it leads to many awkward conversations.
same here. I mean, even just on this podcast, I'm always like struggling. I'm always fumbling my words, and I mean, I use a lot of filler words. You know, it's almost like we feel like we sound dumb. You know, it feels like, oh, this person doesn't know how to talk, or this person doesn't have a very good vocabulary. My vocabulary is great. It's just not always accessible. You know, that's the problem. And I always like, I
Yes.
say that for
Yeah.
me, the words are always floating around, but it's like trying to catch them. It's like trying to catch the golden snitch or something. It's like you're always trying to find the right word, and then you find it, and then it's like find the next word, and it's like there's that delay. And the thing about speech is that it's all improv basically. It's all the words are you have to think the words and say them at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, and that's the hard part because you have these and especially whenever you're trying to convey something complicated. That's when things really get difficult. When you have something that's real clear in your mind, but then just like gets caught in your mouth and won't come out properly.
Yeah, and then it's the worst like if you're ever in an argument with someone too,
Oh
and
God.
like like and you're trying to win the argument and you're just like, "Oh, why aren't my words like I have the words to win." And they're just it's not working.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. That's whenever I really can't speak. When I'm angry about something, the
Mhm.
words just really won't come out. Unless they're dirty words, but I never have trouble coming up with those. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I totally understand what you mean. Just trying to, and it's funny, and I've talked to dyspraxics who have this experience as well, where we'll drone on, like we'll waffle on forever,
Waffle on,
just
yeah.
trying to get something out. Like I'll have a conversation with somebody and I'll try to convey a certain message, and as I'm trying to get to it, it'll be like the end of the conversation, and I'll walk away and I realize I never even made my point. And
Oh
what the
gosh,
hell was I
yeah.
talking
Yeah,
about?
I've had a lot of conversations like that too. It's fine if I can have time to prepare like a statement or a speech, but like you can't just do that in everyday life. Like you have to be able to have conversations with people.
Right. I think that's one of the reasons why I gravitated so much towards acting, um, because I realized whenever I got into theater that I could memorize the words so I don't have to think on my feet. I can just I can hide behind the dialogue, and memorize these lines and these
Yeah.
words that I'm supposed to say so that I know exactly what to say, when to say it. And it's almost like that's one of the only experiences that I can have as a dyspraxic where I can feel that I'm in control of myself because everything is predetermined. Everything is, you've rehearsed it, you've gone through it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got so into acting because it is that kind of, I can feel collected. Whereas in every other aspect of my life, I can't feel collected because I'm always just on edge. I'm always under pressure. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you,
Yeah.
'cause I don't know much
I
about your hobbies, so I don't know if there's anything
So
else.
it's really interesting. I used to be very into theater. I went to a performing arts high school. And my major was
Oh
theater,
wow.
and I was in productions and plays. And when I was a kid, I was like, I'm gonna be a famous actress. Like I was totally into it. And I think like that is a large part of what I really liked about it was like um you know what's expected of you. You don't have to worry about like falling on your face or, well, I mean, unless you mess up, but
Yeah, that
you
could, yeah, that
know
could
this is
still
where you're
happen.
supposed to stand, this is what you're supposed to say, and you know what they're going to do. Like there were no surprises, and I liked that. Um, so I do miss doing that. I don't do it as much anymore because, you know, real life, you know, got in the way, and I was like, I'm probably not going to be famous. So pursued other jobs instead. But
Well, after being on
yeah, I
here, you'll
loved
definitely
it.
be famous.
Oh, I will share with all of my 50 friends on Facebook. No.
Yeah, and I will share it to all my 50 subscribers.
They 100 people
There we go. Yes, exactly. We'll
were
be
viral.
100 people, 100 fans.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. But yeah.
I mean,
I never did like improv though. Was never very good at that.
I was never good at it. When done very little improv. You know, I did some improv in high school, and it was very hit or miss. You know, it was just, I don't
Mhm.
know. Sometimes it was fun. Um, but I mean, I was always acting anyway, you know, even as a kid before I got into theater. Like, my whole dream was to be, you know, the director and the writer. I wanted to do everything. I wanted to be a triple threat. That was my dream. You know, it's like people, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, there's a lot of things I want to be. I want to, I want to be an auteur, you know.
Yeah.
But that feeling, you know, of you, it's like nothing, no place is more comforting for me and than being on stage. It's like the only place that I can just be just totally, you know, connected to people in the world. But yeah, yeah, just being having everything kind of predetermined and laid out for you. And it's just like, and you don't have to try and force your way into standing out. It's like you already have a place. You know, you don't have to find your place in a group of people or whatever. You have your place because you have your character, you know.
Yeah, there's something comforting about that. Like, you know, you can't control really anything in life in the world. You can't control how other people will act or you know, sometimes your emotions, they're difficult to control, but in that environment on stage, you know what's going to happen and you're if you're in your element, it's an amazing feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't have to be thrown to the dogs. You just, you know, you do your thing. And it's what's one of the things that's interesting about talking with dyspraxics is so many people they're so different in terms of their personalities. I don't know how many dyspraxics you've met or how active you've been in sort of the
You are my first talking to someone.
like talking to
Like
another dyspraxic.
yeah. Like, I mean, I'm in some of the like groups, you know, online, but like having like a conversation with someone.
Like having a one-on-one kind of dialogue
Yeah.
about. Well,
Like learning about someone. Yeah.
I'm flattered to be your first one then. Um, I certainly hope you can meet some more
Mhm.
because there are a lot of interesting people. You know, I had found sort of like a group of people I used to do Zoom meetings with. Then a bunch of nonsense happened that, you know, kind of sullied all that, which I don't want to go into now, but some disagreements. But, you know, which just goes to show that, you know, people with dyspraxia are all so different. Their personalities are different. Sometimes they clash, but a lot of times it's like I like being around so many different people with different hobbies, different likes and dislikes. You know, just last week I interviewed someone from the Netherlands who was talking about how she taught herself how to play guitar and learn 5 languages. And it's like, as a dyspraxic, like that's
Oh
incredible.
wow.
You know,
Yeah.
I can't imagine learning a second language. You know, I struggle with my native language. So yeah, um, it's just so interesting to hear all the different hobbies, but also just to be able like talking to somebody else who understands what it's like to be an actor, the feeling, and it's so different as a dyspraxic and acting than for like a neurotypical acting. And that's what's always interesting. And we always have to work so hard, so much harder. And I think because of that, like that's one of the things that's interesting about dyspraxia is you would think that with acting, there's so many things that we would struggle with, right? Um, that it's like being an actor seems like a nightmare for a dyspraxic. But on the other hand, it's also there's a lot of perks that come from it. There's a lot of advantages that we have. Like dyspraxics are often more observant, I feel like. They're often more they're more in tune with people and picking up on things. Like I've always been really good at picking up on facial cues and body language and stuff. So I've been able to imitate kind of I don't know, it's helped me somewhat being in an acting position. I don't know. Like did did anybody ever when you were acting, did anybody ever say, "Oh, wow, like you're really talented." Like was it just something that you just liked to do or was it something that you felt or that others felt you showed a lot of promise in?
Um, well, I think that has less to do with dyspraxia for me specifically. All the plays and productions and stuff I was in, like, well, I'm sure you know because you're in theater. A lot of people will cast not necessarily the best person for the role, but the best, like, the most photogenic person for the role.
Oh yeah.
You know, and they'll be like, oh, this person like just looks prettier or what have you. So I feel like in that regard, I had some competition. There were some pretty girls there. But I had a lot of compliments on my acting, like from directors, from teachers, from family and friends. But I was always like cast as like the sidekicks or the backup roles.
Yeah, I was never a lead. I mean, I was only a few shows where I was ever really a lead. I was always the character actor. I was always the character kind of the person who was doing like the out there roles or which I liked. Um, so that yeah, I mean, I wasn't tall enough, or dashingly handsome enough to get like the major kind of parts.
Yeah.
Like what the roles that I was given, people would remark like, "Oh, I would do the best that I can to make the most of that role." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
As a dyspraxic, what do you think are maybe some of the benefits? Some of the advantages that maybe you've had that you feel like has dyspraxia has affected you in a positive way, whether directly or indirectly. Is there anything that you feel sort of been a blessing for?
Oh gosh, that's a deep question. Um, I don't know if I've had like time to really think about that yet because I'm still kind of in this newer phase of like I'm still learning that certain things do have to do with my dyspraxia. And so I guess one thing I can realize now, I think I'm realizing it's made me sort of resilient. It's made me have to like if I've struggled with certain things, I'm blanking on the words, but
Overcame.
here's me waffling on. But sorry. I've had to learn to find ways to do things, right? Like other people can do things very quickly. Whether it's typing or driving a car or balancing, right? I can do all of those things now. I just have to do them differently. So I feel like it's taught me perseverance in some ways. Because I could have just given up and been like, well, I'm never going to drive a car or like, all those things. But I feel like I don't know. I had to do it, so I did it.
Right. It's like
um,
you had no choice because on some level, I'm sure that to a lot of people, you probably, and I could see just by talking to you that you probably, for the most part, came across as a very normal kind of person, just kind of average. Like, unless people saw you in those situations where you're going to struggle significantly, um, like
yeah,
you're just going to seem like everyone else, right? Nothing really stands out. It's not like having cerebral palsy or having something where it's a lot more noticeable. It is like one of the most like hidden disorders because we can be very social people. I'm somewhat of a social person. You seem like a social person as well. You seem well spoken, so it's like it's not something that's like obvious. And so people kind of they don't
it's true.
you're
Like
expected to be able to thrive the same way as everyone else.
that's true. Yeah. If people get close to me, they can like realize little things. Like I was never able to learn to type correctly, like on a computer, on a keyboard. And so I just kind of like learned to use my index fingers really quickly. And like,
That's
so
so
whenever my
funny.
friends see me, they're like, did you just never learn how? And I was just like, listen, it works for me. I can
Dude,
type pretty quickly, things like that. Or
dude,
like when I'm
oh,
walking,
sorry.
my legs kind of bend in a certain way. And so there's like some hints there that I struggle with my gross motor. But there are things that, you'd have to really pay attention to pick up on.
Right. Do you ever run into people like whenever you're walking, like say you're walking by somebody, like you're walking next to somebody, you ever accidentally like run into them accidentally? I've done that, like when I'm walking.
I did when I was like younger, not so much anymore. Honestly, what happens more often is like I almost like fall over, like I'm like lopsided. I don't know how that happens. Like I'm walking a straight line and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, whoops, I'm on one leg now, balancing to
Uh,
stay. I don't.
yeah, both happens to me.
Yeah.
No, it was the same. The typing thing that I remember very distinctly in sixth grade. That was when we took like typing like class. Like we had like a period of time where we would like in my history class
Mm-hmm.
where you would go to the computer lab and they would. And I remember I always got in trouble because they were expected you to have like your hands like your fingers kind of hovering over certain keys and you had to like keep it all together or something and it was like that was always like I was so time consuming and I was so much slower doing that I would just like I became like the fastest you know index finger typist in the West like it was and I've written a lot so it's funny because I type very fast. I make a lot of typos because of it, but I type very
Yeah.
fast because I'm just like typing with, two fingers. So that's funny to me. Almost, oh, my microphone. I didn't cut out, did I?
No, you're good.
It's probably not even picking up the right mic. So I apologize to anybody if I sound weird because my mic has been weird. It may be picking up my computer audio. So hopefully you can hear me well enough, but um, yeah, just typing was just it's these we have to cut corners in certain ways and we have to like you said we have to do things differently and it's always unfortunate whenever the things that's like you get the same results even better results than if you were to do it the normal way but you know people like sometimes like I'm dealing with this right now at my job where it's like there are certain things that I could do but if I do them like my way I'll get in trouble because they want you to do it a certain way so that
Right. It's instances like that where having like a diagnosis would be helpful to show it like an employer.
well yeah I remember one time I I don't want to get like so deep and depressing or anything but I was actually in the hospital because of a suicide attempt and I was visited by like a social worker and she asked me some questions and like about why I did it and and I talked about my dyspraxia and how it was never taken seriously, and I could never find a diagnosis. And I remember her asking me, "Well, what good would a diagnosis do you? Like, what would that even? How would that change anything?" And I thought about it, and it's like, well, it's it's validation, you know,
It is.
it's confirmation that it isn't all in my head. It isn't just something that I just incorrectly believe. Even now, I have a friend who asked me once, is it just are you just making it as an excuse? Like, do you just want to say you have? I remember one time my friend said that he asked me if I am only saying that I'm dyspraxic because I want to be more like Daniel Radcliffe.
Wait, what? That's so silly.
I know, right? And I don't know if he was serious, but um, that was like, I was like, what? Um, but it's like, it may seem like on the surface that having a diagnosis for dyspraxia wouldn't do a whole lot, but it is like now you have this official thing that says, you know, you're dyspraxic, and you can have that confirmation and be able to say, I'm now clinically, now you don't want to say labeled because you don't want to be labeled, but now it's confirmation.
Yeah, it's true.
So I don't want to get like too personal, um, but has your dyspraxia like, and again, if you're not comfortable like saying either way, but like, has it affected your mental health? Has it as far as an emotional level? Have you experienced much as far as that's concerned? Because some people are still able to just thrive. Some people go through deep
Hmm.
darkness and stuff, kind of like what I did. Um, so I don't know, like, were you one of those people that was just all like resilient about it? It's like, oh, it's just something that I deal with, but I'm gonna keep on trucking. Um, or did you ever go through a period where it was like kind of got to you, you know?
Yeah, I think I I mean, I've struggled with my mental health in the past. I don't know how much of that was really due to dyspraxia because at the time, like, I didn't know I had dyspraxia, and it wasn't specifically because of anything that I can now realize dyspraxia caused.
Hmm.
So I think I mean, maybe in a sense, because there were a lot of little things that I know now dyspraxia caused. But at the time, there were just a lot of little things that I was just quote unquote bad at. So I just thought, oh, I'm dumb. I'm bad at this. I'm defective, you know? So I suppose in a sense that probably really did affect my self-worth, but that wasn't like the only thing, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, it never is.
right. Yeah. But yeah, I'm a proponent of mental health and reducing the stigma surrounding that. So that's honestly, I was really nervous to come on this podcast tonight because I've never quite done anything like this. And I was just thinking, like, well, like if it helps even just like one person, like if one person listens to this, you know, and like maybe they can find solace in it, or like they can maybe learn something new, or just know that they're not alone. So that's why I did decide to. I didn't stand you up. I came on the show tonight.
Yes. It was difficult to find the right time for me, but it's funny because I've done a few of these now, and I'm always nervous every time to do it. I'm always like beforehand because I'm always I'm such an insecure person and such a like a worrywart that I'm like always just thinking like, oh man, am I gonna how much am I gonna struggle to piece myself together and to get my words out properly? Um, and of course, there's always the thing of like, how much is the guest going to talk? Is the guest going to be just like very? Because I've had people before who they just answer questions and then like so much is all just on me, just like trying to keep it going. Like, okay, question, and then they just give a very brief, short answer. And it's like, do you have anything else
Oh
to?
wow.
And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, come on. And you're like, you're trying to fill up the hour, but most of the time, the conversation always kind of flows really well, which is always nice. And um, I'm glad you came on because it has been great, and it has, we've talked a lot about things that I think people would really relate to, and I'm always happy that people can share their experiences and how much it relates to mine and others, but also how it's unique to them because your experiences are unique to you. And you know, you seem like a well-adjusted person. I don't know you very well, but you seem like you're pretty well-adjusted, and I mean, you drive a car, which is more than I do. Um, Tell me a little bit more about the other things in your life. Like, well, you say that are you currently a teacher's assistant? Is education something that you want to go in personally, or like what kind of things are you up to? What kind of things are you doing? How do you sort of
Oh
live,
yeah.
and how does dyspraxia kind of relate to your life now, or does it affect your current situation?
Mhm. Um, yeah, I'm a childcare professional, so I mostly nanny nowadays, which is really nice. And I mean, I don't live a terribly exciting life, but yeah, so I live in Texas. I'm a nanny. That's I like to do art in my free time. I craft and paint and things like that. Um, I think I think right now dyspraxia probably affects me the most um, physically with my I have hypermobility in my joints, and there's a high correlation between that and dyspraxia. And so right now physically, I have to wear knee braces um, because my knees just bend too far back and it becomes painful, and they don't kind of walk in a straight line. They don't do their job correctly. So I have to help them. And so that's something more recent. Like they've always kind of just been like off center and a little bit weird to walk, but I'm fairly tall. I'm like 5'11". So for a large
You tower me.
chunk of my life, yeah. So for like a large part of my life, I was just like, oh, I just have these problems because I'm tall, you know? But then I started meeting other tall people and they didn't have these problems. I was like, oh, okay, well,
Well, we all play basketball.
maybe yeah, and I could not. Um, so I realized a few years ago that my joints are hypermobile, which it's kind of like a fancy way of saying they're double jointed. It's what like the contortionists have. So like people in the circus, they can move their bodies in different
Mhm.
ways.
With their
So
legs
my
up their
joints do that, but like it's not as fun. I can't. I'm not in the circus. Some people, it's actually much more problematic, and they actually like have like it's not good and they need actual like physical therapy and like treatments, and it's very painful. Mine isn't like that bad. I haven't sprained or torn anything, but especially, I mean, my other joints get it too, like my wrists sometimes, but
Uh-huh.
right now it's just mostly my knees, so I wear knee braces. So yeah, I didn't even know. Well, I knew I had that before I knew I had dyspraxia. um, and so when I found out about dyspraxia, I was like, just like on a hunch, like was wondering if anyone in this group I'm in, if anyone had issues with their knees, and everyone was just like, yeah, yes,
I don't know if this
it's
is
dyspraxia. Yes.
I don't know if this is like similar, but I I struggle to like get on my knees like and to get up from like if I have to crouch down. Like in my job, I'm a personal shopper, so like I go around the store and pick up items off the shelf, and sometimes I have to like
Hmm.
bend my knees and grab, and it hurts. Like my knees are like weak. I don't know if that's at all similar. I don't think I have hypermobility, but I think I do have like joint pains and weakness,
Yeah, it's
low muscle tone.
interesting like how it affects your joints. Like that's what I mean, like so many random things that just all fit together and it's like dyspraxia. Um, but
Dyspraxia.
yeah, so for me, I I have a really terrible time kneeling. Like I mean it is hard to like kneel like just to get down there and then like stand back up, but like kneeling itself becomes painful.
Oh
And I've
yeah,
actually I've fainted before because I've like been kneeling at church and things like that. And
I was
like,
gonna
you
say.
know, passed out, woke up with like a priest blessing me and all these. I'm
Yeah,
like, oh no, like, am I
I
alive?
was
Am I
yeah,
okay?
I was just
Um,
thinking like I'm glad I'm an atheist, so I don't have to do all that kneeling.
yeah,
It'll hurt.
yeah. Yeah, and so that yeah. So I've just kind of like dealt with that for a while. But I feel like as I've gotten older, it's becoming a bit more problematic. Not I mean, I'm thinking I might look into seeing like a physical therapist or something to see if maybe they can help straighten my gait because I think it's an issue how I walk. It's hard to explain. My knees just kind of go in, my feet kind of go in.
Mhm.
I don't know.
I I was told that I kind of have a duck walk or something. Like my feet kind of turn out in this weird way. I don't know. I don't think. I mean, I've corrected it somewhat, but yeah, people tell me that I walk weird, and then that's one of the reasons I think why I'll be walking next to a person, and like if we're turning a corner, like I'll like bump into them. Um,
Yeah.
whenever you so you mentioned that when you were younger, you took like you had like occupational therapy. Like, what were some of the things that you did? Because I kind of took occupational therapy as well, but I don't know if it was mainly for like my handwriting and stuff, and they also tried to teach me
Mm-hmm.
how to tie my shoes. Um, what was it like for you? What did y'all do?
It was basically the same. It was probably like, gosh, like second grade or I mean, maybe even first grade. It was so long ago. But basically, they just had those like cushy pencil grips that they would put on a pencil. And it was kind of so like,
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
yeah, they're kind of like rubbery
Yeah,
gel things. And it's supposed to make you hold the pencil a certain way. And so I would just hold it and they'd be like, no, like this, no, like this, just like repeatedly until I like held it that way.
I haven't thought about those
Um,
in a long time.
yeah.
I never even knew
Uh,
that they were for
there's,
that.
I'm sure that they have like a name, but yeah, it's so that you hold the pencil the correct way. Cause I was kind of gripping it like a fist and they were like not correctly, like with your fingers, you know? And then I know that they did teach me how to tie my shoes, which I still don't like doing that to this day. Like I'll just leave them a little bit loose and like slip my feet in and out of them because
That's
I'm like, I just don't want to
exactly
tie
what I
them.
do. Exactly what I do.
Yeah. And then I think they taught me cursive. I don't really know. It was weird because they pulled me out of class like once a week for that, for like half an hour or
It
something.
was like one person,
So
like
I don't really know.
little
Yeah, it was like a couple people and a couple kids. Yeah.
yeah, that
I
was
don't
one
know
of the
how like good it actually was, but that's what it was.
yeah, that's oh man, my mic. I don't even know why I'm trying to mess with it because it's clearly not using that mic. I'm very nervous about how this is gonna turn out as far as my audio. That's one of the things I struggle with so much. But no, getting back to occupational therapy, yeah, that's kind of what it was for me. Like it was always like me and a couple other kids. Um, so I always wondered, like, were those other kids dyspraxic and they didn't know either? Like, I always wonder what the deal was for them. It was like they always had like another kid, and it was someone I knew, and it was like they would help us with our handwriting, and that's one of the crazy things. It's like you think about how many people did I know that were dyspraxic and they didn't know, you know? Like I remember working with this one girl at a previous job and she struggled a lot with like her motor skills and things like that and her balance. And she was like, sadly, like very, she was a very depressed kind of person, struggled a lot with her mental health, um, and she just like would just casually say like, "Oh no, I'm just dumb," you know. She'd just say things like that,
Hmm.
and part of me, I did actually consider like asking her, you know, well, have you ever heard of dyspraxia? Like I consider, but then I just thought of like, I don't want her to feel like I'm calling attention to it, like I'm, you know, like I don't know, I don't want her to feel like I don't want to make her feel bad, you know, and come across the wrong way. But so I just kind of left it alone. But I do wonder that about people sometimes, you know, because being in America, it's like very few people can go around and understand these issues. And it's one of those things that you try to hide it so much that it just becomes something you go through life. And a person shouldn't have to go through their entire lives dealing with something and not being aware of what it is and what the cause is, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
Um, so, you know, I should have asked this before, but like, how long ago did you discover that you were dyspraxic?
Mm, I'm trying to think. Like last month?
Oh, okay. So you're very new to
Yes.
this whole thing.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
was
still so fresh for you.
Yeah. I mean, it made so much sense because I remember vividly saying to different people, like, it just feels like my fine motor skills, it just feels like I never learned them properly, or like there's a disconnect between my hands and my brain, and people would just be like, okay, yeah, whatever. But I'm like, no, like, because like I would like playing video games, I would have a hard time with the controllers, and I'd always lose. And they'd be like, "Oh, you're just a sore loser," and I'm like, "No, I have issues. I know I have issues." So
Oh,
now
I
I'm
bring
like,
back memories.
so now I tease my boyfriend, and I'm just like, "You only won at Mario Kart because I have dyspraxia. Like that's the only reason why."
You have an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
Um, well, so you it's funny because you know just I'm sure a month ago you didn't realize you would just be on a podcast talking about this. So you're still kind of yeah, you're so new to this whole community. Like, what more do you want to get out of it? You know, do you have any kind of hopes for going forward, knowing that you're dyspraxic? Uh, I don't know, like, where do you see yourself from here in the world of, you know, being a dyspraxic and identifying sort of, you know, being part of that whole scene now. Now you're part of you're one of the oddities, like the rest of us. One of
Oh
us,
gosh,
one of
yeah.
us.
I think. Well, I think I'm not gonna lie, it would be so nice if, someone listening to this or someone that I, communicate with in a group or something, if they're just like, oh, well, I have a contact and, you know, they could like, there's a doctor who could like officially diagnose you or like, I don't know. I feel like there could be studies or something because I saw that there was a study for kids now in America who might have dyspraxia. And I'm just like, oh, like maybe there'll be one for adults. So I guess I'm just kind of like waiting for America to catch up and to like have resources or like to spread awareness about this. Just kind of waiting to see what happens with that. But I think mostly um, I'm just I'm excited to be involved in a community where there's understanding, where we can be like, I'm in this one group and people just like post pictures of all the clumsy stuff they did that day. And everyone's just like, oh, hang in there. I've been there.
Dyspraxic.
Um, and it's just, yeah. And it's just very like reassuring and validating in a way, that if I can't have an official diagnosis, at least there are people who know what it's like.
Yeah, you find that reciprocity, that kind of that understanding. I remember the when I was in those Zoom meetings, and I would get together with these people. This was during the pandemic, and so like I just remember we would be talking about something, and like obviously with dyspraxia, you struggle to find the words sometimes, but it's like you would just barely start talking about something that you experienced, and everybody would just immediately just understand. Like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. Yeah. And that's one of the amazing things is like because the symptoms are so specific, it's like you go your whole life without realizing what's going on. And then now all of a sudden you're with people that just get it. You don't have to explain it to them like you do everyone else. Like why do you have struggle with this? It's like everybody just they get it. We got you. We get it. And it's an amazing
Yes,
feeling.
exactly.
And I certainly hope that you find more
Yeah, it
people
really.
like that, being part of it. I hope you can make great friends and great connections with people who understand the plight that you have, because it's always a rewarding feeling.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I've felt really supported in the groups that I've been in, even when I've just asked like a couple of questions here and there, And now I'm on a podcast where I'm going to be famous, so I'm sure I'm going to make lots of new friends.
Yeah. Let's hope, right? Um,
Hmm.
so I think this is a good point to depart. But before I let you go, is there anything else you would like to share? Anything else you'd like to discuss or anything? Just any parting words, anything you want to tell people out there? Just anything you'd like to share before we go.
Hmm. I think um, just to tell all the listeners here that it's so important to spread awareness about dyspraxia. Um, I mean, I, I'm 23. It took me 23 years, to realize that this is what I have, and how validating it felt to realize. And so I think, and I found out because of like a random comment someone made, in a video I was watching. So I think if we just continue spreading awareness, especially like in America, particularly, I think like we can we can make change. There's a lot more we can do for people, for children and for adults who have these difficulties and don't have a name for it.
And well, you certainly are doing your part just by being here and sharing your experiences, and I'm very glad that you did. So thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you. Definitely love to have you back if you like in the future. Um, and yeah, I think that's about it. So thank you so much for being my guest
Thank
today
you, Brandon.
and for just being able to tell your story. And yeah, I wish nothing but the best for you. And I hope that you certainly find, a lot more connections and things within the community. And just, yeah, all the best. And keep
Awesome.
waffling
Thank you so
on too.
much. I don't think I can stop waffling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it was a
Thanks for
pleasure.
having me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Anytime.